Mark Field.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Unlike the honourable gentleman for Oxford, West and Abingdon, I believe that the empire of the law should have some limits. It is perhaps perverse for someone who is a legislator to say this, but I don't think that the change in the law would be the right way forward in this regard, although I very much understand the suffering to which he and indeed the honourable gentleman for Walsall North referred to in their speech in individual cases. I was in the situation that my late father was dying 18 years ago, and as one of his next of kin, I had a role in ensuring and working with a long-standing family doctor to make sure that he was terminally ill with cancer, that he had enough morphine to ward off pain, and probably to an extent his life might have gone on a few days or weeks longer than otherwise would have done. That seemed to be a very common sense approach to this, and I think that at one level it might seem rather hypocritical, but I think we should perhaps at times turn a blind eye in what are often desperately difficult circumstances. We do also need, I think, to recognise that as there is a compensation and blame culture becomes more prevalent across the world and in this country, that medical professionals in particular will become increasingly reluctant to do the right thing if there are laws in place that may be seen as providing safeguards but actually simply regulate their lives more strongly. I also fear that a regime and an assisted dying regime and a euthanasia regime might put pressure on elderly people who do not have an immediately life-threatening condition, and that in essence the right to die will morph almost to a duty to die. Mr. Bailey, there was a case very recently, a high-profile case that I think I can refer to, of the 23-year-old rugby player Daniel James, who was taken by his parents out to Switzerland. Dreadful case. I have to say the one most disquieting aspect of this was when his parents, when this all came into the public domain, some months indeed after his death in Switzerland, his parents referred to him as being a second-class citizen, given the injuries he had sustained. And they were very serious injuries, may not even under the Joffrey safeguard have come through. They were serious injuries, had massively affected his quality of life, but were not indeed life-threatening. It was envisaged he could well have lived for some decades to come. I think it's very, very worrying, this notion of his in any way having a second-class life or being a second-class citizen. Going down that road, I think, is a very dangerous one in saying that some lives are more valuable than others. Just briefly.
For giving way. Would he confirm, however, that had Lord Joffrey's bill been enacted, that individual would not have been able to secure the right to die under that legislation because of the protections that are in there?
Yeah, absolutely. And in many ways, it shows some of the difficulties that we are faced with trying to somehow frame a law that is going to cover all the cases that we wish to be framed, and to ensure that individuals had the right to die or to go through an assisted dying process. What worried me most about that particular case was, I think, the lack of common sense perhaps shown by the police. And the reality of the situation sounds rather hypocritical. Perhaps it is someone who does believe in a higher being. Unlike the Honourable Member for Oxford, West and Abingdon, I believe that these ethical and moral matters, possibly the judge shouldn't necessarily be on this planet. It has to be elsewhere. But there needs to be, I think, a common sense approach shown by the police. I must say I was encouraged by what the Minister said, that indeed there have been 0 prosecutions in the almost 50 years since some of the statute, imprisonment, even if there have been prosecutions and indeed some level of investigation. I think we need to have a much more common sense approach on these matters. They are desperately difficult ethical matters. I'm glad we have this debate today. I know many other members wish to say rather more, and I do hope that we will have as many people able to put their viewpoints across in the course of today's debate, and obviously we'll be very interested to hear some of the thinking that is coming from the government about how they feel, if at all, this element of the law needs to be changed going forward.
Thank you.